book clubs and family involvement. This past year is the first year in probably 5 that I didn't do any family events for book clubs. And that was simply because I opened up this brand new library and we started school late, and I had about a week before we got started to move in, and that included unpacking the books. And then, of course, we got out in March. So this experience is what I've done for 5 or 6 years at my previous school, which was Southern Elementary School. And for us, we needed more parents to get involved with our school. And it's always hard to get parents to do that. But I love book clubs, and I thought, well, I'm going to try and do a book club and to get kids to come, but also with their parents. So we'll get started, and I'll maybe be able to show you my screen. Let's see how smart I am on this. Oh, look at there. So these photos are actually from all of the book clubs that I have done. My email is at the bottom. So if there is, for some reason, a question that you have I don't answer today and we run out of time, or in 6 months you have a question, please feel free to email me. That is the formal name, but I do go by Jill. So the picture down here, this was Horrible Harry and the Green Slime family book club where we actually made slime. And obviously that family was having a fantastic time with our book club. So I'd arranged my slides because I always feel like the money thing is going to be your first question. So your big thing might be, how are you going to pay in order to do a book club? And so I have 4 suggestions. My experience with this is we always used something called family involvement money. And we have that. I don't know if that is a district thing. I don't know if that is across the state. But we have a special fund that is set aside for family involvement events. And each school gets a certain amount of money. That amount of money changes every year. But then there's also a district money. So a lot of times if I ran over our school budget of family involvement, I was able to kind of dip into that district. All of this, of course, had to be approved, and I'll show you that form in just a moment. You can always pay for it out of your library budget. I have also found our public library, or like the Kiwanis Club, they will help pay for events like this. And if you have a really active PTA or PTO, you could get involved. For me, let's see. Trying to click on this first link here. I have to fill out, because we are a Title I school and district, I have to fill out this form. So I just put a link here to show you what that form looks like. Again, I don't know if that is something that you all have at your school, but this is how I always paid for it. So when we did this particular event, this was our Judy Moody Book Club, and I am going to walk you through the steps of how I set this up with this one book club. We requested $600, and the way that we divided that out, it was a $100 stipend for myself and my partner teacher. And then we spent $500 on our supplies. That included the books. That included all the materials that we used. We did a snack, and that always made it nice. We also based this on 2 different meetings. So this was $600 for the 2 meetings. And I'm going to stop there for just a second and admit the person that's coming in. And then I'll go back slowly. There we go. So that's kind of how I've always paid for it, is using something called family involvement money. The next thing I would encourage you to do is just to choose your focus. So I have done more than 4, but these were just the 4 different ones. When I did the Judy Moody Book Club, we focused on character traits and character and what that was like. And that was a 2nd and 3rd grade book club. Where the Mountain Meets the Moon, we focused on embedded stories, but also character traits. And I did that for 4th and 5th grades. Stink, the solar system superhero, and we did a 2nd book with that, Planets. And our focus on that was the difference between fiction and nonfiction text features and how to tell the difference. And then I've done a 1st grade club with Dinosaurs Before Dark. And that was just to get 1st graders interested in learning how to read a chapter book for the first time. Sometimes parents don't know exactly what to do with their kids when they start that transition from picture books to chapter books. So that was a lot of fun to show parents that. For me, the next thing, you don't have to have a partner, but I do encourage it. It just makes the workload a little bit easier. And for me, I always chose our RTI Title I coordinator. Her name's Angie Wallace. I do have her permission to share all of our information with you guys today. But she was somebody that I knew I could count on to do the work. Sometimes you get paired with people and you still end up doing all the work, and Angie is not like that. You might think about a grade level teacher that you can work with. Since you're the librarian, it might be a grade level that you're gonna focus on. Maybe second grade's having a really hard time. Maybe you want to concentrate on fifth grade because they're getting ready to leave. Also, don't discredit your RTI teachers, your special area. Anybody in the building can be your partner with your book club. So the next thing is obviously you need to choose your book. I always feel like you need to choose your focus and then your book, but sometimes we chose the book and then decided on our focus. For me, I always thought about three things. Do I have multiple copies in my collection? When I did the Judy Moody book club, I had 5 copies already. So I knew that I didn't have to buy as many. I've also borrowed books from other libraries. Thank you to all my district librarians that lets me borrow books sometimes. Another thing you can think about is where can you order books? You might need it quick or you might need it cheap. Scholastic usually does a pretty good job getting the books there, but I've also ordered them from Follett. Follett takes a little bit longer to get them in. And then obviously, what is going to fit your focus? So when I talked about the stink with fiction and nonfiction, those were the 2 books, The Planets and Stink Solar System Superhero. The next thing that I always do is we talk about a sign up. It's really important for you to decide how you're going to get kids interested and how you're going to get them to get that information back to you. So we always sent home an interest letter to the grade levels that we were focusing on. So second and third grade, we sent them home to every second and third grade teacher. We did it on the same day. Usually we would hand deliver these notes to the teachers to pass out or to put in folders. And we found that if we hand delivered it to them versus putting it in their mailbox, that prevented the teacher A sending it home on Monday and teacher B sending it home on Friday. It really forced the teachers to send it all home on the same day. And that really helped give kids a fair chance. We also always had to cap the number. And of course, we base that on our books. The worst thing is if you say we're going to have 20 kids and you get kid number 21 that signs up. We found, though, that we had to stick to that number because everything was based on that number. Our supplies were based on that number, our budget, everything. So you really have to stick to your number. The other thing is one teacher needs to control the sign up. So if there's 2 of you, it needs to be one person that collects all that information. When Angie and I worked together, it was always me because the kids knew who I was. Where she was with RTI, not all the kids knew her. So she didn't have as much central location as I did as the librarian. And then we always did a short deadline. So we always tried to send things home like on a Monday, and then we wanted them back by Thursday because we felt that if a letter went home and we didn't give it that quick deadline, it's going to get lost and all the other paperwork that comes home. Plus, it gives it that sense of urgency, the whole, I need to get this paper back so that I can get into this book club. We also, so I'm going to show you a picture of what our interest letter for Judy Moody looked like. It was just real simple. It was, we wanted to invite them. It explained what we were going to focus on. It explained too what the 2 dates were. So all of our book clubs, we always did 2 dates. We did the first meeting where we introduced everything, and then we did a second meeting where the kids had some kind of a project or a presentation. We also told them that there were only going to be a certain number of students that could join. So that also let them know there was a little bit of urgency at the bottom with their signups. And then at the bottom, we always had student's name, teacher name, and then parent who was going to participate. The other thing I might recommend that you add to this is you need to probably put a phone number on there that the parent could be reached, just so that if there was an issue, you could very quickly have all of that information at one time. Because this was a family involvement and we expected the parents to come with them, we knew that we didn't need the parent number in terms of a kid not getting picked up on time or anything like that. One kind of sticking point that we tended to run into is people with younger children wanted to always bring younger brother and sister to the meeting. And so that was kind of a challenge. You have to decide as librarian how you're going to handle that situation. For us, we found that sometimes it was easier to say, no, this is a really special time with just you and your student. And that sometimes made parents frustrated because maybe they couldn't get childcare. So you just have to determine what is your situation, what's going to help you out in that. The other thing, as soon as they sign up and they get accepted, we would send home a letter with the kids showing that they were now in the book club and then just giving those dates again. So this is when we're going to meet. We did Tuesday, October 23rd, and then November 8th. And we always did it from 6 to 7 to hopefully give parents time to get home from work. So that's just kind of what that letter looked like. And that, again, just went home to the students that did make our club. We also had a wait list. So for Judy Moody was always the most popular book club we did. Second and third graders are super excited. And we just had a little note that we sent home with kids. Hey, we just wanted to let you know that all the slots are filled and you have gone onto our wait list. And if information, if somebody cancels, then we would call that student and say, hey, we just wanted to let you know that we now have an opening if you want to join our book club. And a lot of times too, we sent letters if we were going to do another book club with the same age group. We sent that letter for the next book club home with those kids that were on the wait list, just to give them the opportunity to hopefully get into a book club the next time. The next thing that we had to focus on was planning our night. So for our book clubs, we found out that Tuesdays and Thursdays tended to be good days of the week in order to do it. Nobody usually wants to meet on a Monday or a Friday. And we found that from 6 to 7 was the best time. 7 o'clock, because then we could still clean up and get home at a reasonable hour. People could hopefully still get dinner, either whether they were eating before they came to the meeting or after. We also had to gather our materials and supplies. For me, it took usually a month and a half to be prepared to send the paperwork in so that I knew we would get materials back in time. And a lot of that depended on which company we used when it came to the books. So we knew that Follett was always going to take just a little bit longer than Scholastic. Scholastic, we could almost always get books back within a week and a half. So for us, it was just a matter of how long that paperwork was going to take to go through my school, then to the district, then to the vendor we were buying something from. When you think about your night, you need to think about an activity for your early arrivers, because you're always going to have those parents that get there early and then they're just staring at you. So we always had some kind of a coloring or bookmark, something that they could just do that was fun. But it was also okay if kids didn't have time to do that while they were there. We also tried to make the night very interactive for the kid and the parent. It is really hard sometimes as a teacher. We're so used to standing up and teaching that we had to give the parents time to work with their kid. The other thing is, during that early arrival time, is to make sure you check out the books to the students. Any of the books that I bought for these book clubs, they immediately became part of the library collection. So if I ordered 25 books, they were now library books. And that allowed us to track them. It made the kids kind of responsible. You may not be able to have that same experience. You may buy the books and then give it to the kids to keep. That's up to you. Next, when it comes to your meeting, you want to decide which teacher is going to speak at what time. Angie and I always, there's a picture of Angie and then my daughter. That was our presentation for the stink solar system. But we always decided which teacher was going to be in charge of what part of the presentation. It just made things go a little bit easier. Another thing you might consider is a snack. We tended to do something that wasn't messy, maybe pretzels in a juice box, but the kids really appreciated having something, especially because you're kind of doing it, or for us, we were kind of doing it during dinner time. Anytime we had our first meeting, we also wanted to make sure that we got them started on the book. So Angie and I always read the first chapter out loud, and then we practiced the focus. So when we were doing the Judy Booty Book Club, again, I told you that our focus was on character traits. So we gave kids a sheet that had different character traits on it, and we talked about what characters would look like if they had these traits. And that just showed parents how that conversation should work as they um, continued to read the book with their child. They don't know what we mean sometimes when we say character traits. So giving them a list helps them obviously to be a little bit more successful. And then our focus, we gave them a picture of just a person. And so when we focused on our character traits, we had the kids, after we read the first chapter of Judy Moody, we had them color Judy Moody. So based on the first chapter, they put in her hair color. They usually picked the outfit very similar to what she was wearing on the book cover. And then with the second chapter, we had the kids and the parent go back and read the second chapter together. And then at the end, we started talking about how people are more than what they look like on the outside. So we gave them a second sheet of paper that looked just like the first one with the person. And we had them talk about what Judy Moody was thinking, what she was feeling, what she was doing. And we had them relate that to character traits. And we stapled those together to show that sometimes what we see on the outside is not the official character traits. And that had them thinking a little bit more in depth. So, after every first meeting, we always gave them some homework to do. And that was always their project. So, for example, you might give them a fun bookmark to use. This is one that I just created real quick that had them think about the characters, the setting, the problem solution. How do they prove that's a realistic fiction book? And then how would they rate it? Just something fun to have. That's also a great thing to have as your early activity for early arrivers. The next thing we gave parents was a calendar of the suggested reading. And that's because, again, students at this age don't necessarily know how to plan for how to read a chapter book. So we always took the meeting dates and then we showed what we would suggest reading in order to finish before our next meeting. We also showed them how to plan a little bit for their project, like brainstorm your ideas for what your project is going to be, then collect your items, and then make a list of the supplies. And then we broke it down, like now write your name. And so we encouraged the families to try to follow the calendar, but I also told them that it was okay if you get off schedule. Maybe you have a baseball game and you can't do that activity on that day. That's fine. But it just said, you just still have to make sure you're finished. So the parents really liked the calendar. That was probably one of their favorite things, is it gave them a little bit of homework. We also always had a final project or some kind of artwork, and we did always hang those up around the school. So for our Judy Moody project, it was the me collage. And Judy Moody does this in the story. So if they read the whole book and then start their collage, they would understand the information here, like who am I, where I live. Those were the titles of the chapters in the book. And then we talked to the parents too about what we wanted them to do when they came back. And that was that we wanted them to present the poster to the group and to think about 2 items that they wanted to talk about during their presentation. Again, we had a 1-hour meeting and potentially 20 kids that were going to present. So we wanted to make sure that everybody had enough time. We did not obviously require them to present, but we did encourage it. The next point, I put weekly check-ins during the school day. When we did Where the Mountain Meets the Moon, that's a much longer book. And we had 2 in-school meetings for that. I had a retired librarian that was able to come in and meet with the students and just do a little check with them. Were they understanding the book? Were they staying on schedule? Did they have any questions? And they would come during their lunchtime. So they brought their lunch to the library, which they thought was fantastic. And that allowed them just another little check-in, another conversation about books. Then we also always sent home comprehension questions. We strongly encourage them. These were just for discussion. This was not, you have to answer these questions. This is just going to help you understand the book maybe a little bit more, or to check your comprehension after you're finished reading. So again, it wasn't a required, you have to do this. This was just the idea of you working with your student. Okay, I am going to pause right there. And then anybody have questions up to this point? I'm not done. I just want to see.
Jill, what people wanted is could you share the link to your presentation?
Yes.
And someone asked, are book clubs only 2 sessions?
I always did mine as 2 sessions. And that was because we tried to do a book club every month. So we wanted it to begin and end within a month. The shorter books like the Judy, Moody, and Stink, we found that 2 weeks was usually plenty to get that book done. We found that if we extended it out further, the kids wouldn't stay with the book. They would forget about it. And so for us, it was just always good to have a beginning and then an ending, because the whole purpose for us was to try to get our parents to read with their kids, to talk about the words like character traits and nonfiction text. Okay.
Another comment was, could you use books from Epic for your book club instead of physical copies? That was kind of a suggestion.
Oh, that is a great idea. Definitely. We just always gave them the physical copy that they could be able to take home, not knowing the school that I came from where I did most of these, a lot of the kids would not have had technology access. So for that particular school, for me, I don't know that that would have worked, but definitely you could definitely do a more virtual instance. I'm already thinking, like, how would you convert these if we have to go virtually? Somebody said, was the $500 supply budget for all of them or just one of them? That was just for the Judy Moody Book Club. And that's because we buy the initial book that we read. And then I'll go into in a few minutes. We always give the kids a book that becomes their own personal copy. So we usually bought 1 to 2 books that we were going to do as a giveaway that they got to keep. So that was most of our cost, was just books. We usually did a snack, and then we did supplies. So we always made sure that we had markers. For their me collage, we gave them a poster board, so they didn't have to worry about having those supplies. All right, so we're about 30 minutes in, and I'm doing good, I think, on the actual presentation slides. So I'm going to jump back in, just kind of put your questions over there, and I'll come back to them. All right. Next one. So our second meeting, this was always the one that there was going to be some kind of a presentation. So again, plan for your early arrivers. Over on our picture, you can see the yellow sheet of paper. That was our activity for early arrivers, is we gave them a little chapter description and they drew an illustration from it. Now, eventually everybody had time to do these because it was part of our activity for the night. And again, that was for Where the Mountain Meets the Moon. So that was a great early arriver activity. Our second meeting, we also always tried to make sure there was some table talk. So maybe we left a couple of questions in the middle of the table and said, hey, talk with your table partner about your favorite part of the book and tell them why it was your favorite part, or maybe a character you liked or didn't like. But we always, when they came back, we wanted to get those kids talking about the book again, and not just with their friends, but also to get the parents involved in that conversation. We always followed that by a presentation of their projects. So in this case, this would have been the Judy Moody posters, all about me. And then something that I sometimes would forget is always make sure there's somebody there to take pictures. You want to take a picture of each child individually giving their presentation so that you can then give them that picture. And then we ended the night with a book giveaway. So for Judy Moody, we went through and we purchased some of the book collections you can get through Scholastic, where you can get books 1 through 10. And you will always find that your second meeting has lower participation than the first one. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, life happens and they forget. Or it could be they didn't finish the book and they don't want to come, or they didn't do the project. But we based how many books we gave away on how many kids attended. So if we had kind of lower attendance, sometimes kids walked away with 2 books or even 3. We also like to do a snack, so that during the presentation, it cut down on some of the talking that kids like to do. And that allowed them, just that, again, have a little snack, because we tended to do ours kind of, in my opinion, during the dinner hour. On this next slide, I have the other 2. I gave you 2 more examples of books that I did. We did Where the Mountain Meets the Moon. And I put that on here because that was more aimed towards 4th and 5th. And then we did The Dinosaurs Before Dark. That was for 1st grade. So Where the Mountain Meets the Moon, the best thing that I used was Grace Lynn's website. She has a teacher guide on there, and she has activities. You can download it. It's free. She even talks about how to do your own event, how to make board games. So I took her teacher guide and I based our entire family involvement book club on her guides. So most of Where the Mountain Meets the Moon, that's not my information. That is information that Grace Lynn actually put out for her book. So we really worked with the kids on how to state evidence from the text on their characters and their character traits. And we walked them through during our first meeting, how to choose a character and how to pinpoint what the character trait was, and then how to prove that with evidence from the text. When you come to testing, I hate the word testing, but when you come to that, that is really important information. And so we worked through that during our first book club meeting. We sent home, again, discussion questions for each of those different chapters. These were shorter chapters, so we kind of paired them. And again, most of these questions are from Grace Lynn's discussion guide. I didn't send home as many as she had. I pared that down a lot. Their project for Where the Mountain Meets the Moon was to pick a character and show the development of that character over time. So they were assigned a certain number of chapters, the first 9, to pick their character and to have them tell how that character grew over the course of the book. And so they had to share text evidence from that, how they started at the beginning of the book, and then how they happened at the end. And then again, we gave them a poster to take home, and then they were to bring back that poster for their final presentation for our second meeting. We again did the same thing with an interest letter that we sent home. You're invited to. This one we gave them a full month just because of the length of the book, but we did have 2 in-school lunches. So if you see there, we did a September 4th and then September 20th. So we wanted to catch them pretty quick after we had the first in-person night meeting. And then again, right before they were going to have to come to the last meeting, we wanted to make sure they were staying on target. So again, just a very similar form to what we sent home for the Judy Moody. And then we also sent home that calendar. Again, this one was a little bit more challenging because you're trying to put an entire chapter book into a 1 month setting, but we did it. They didn't have to read more than 2 or 3 chapters every night. And then we also wanted to make sure that they finished the book about a week before their project was due. And again, we broke that project into small steps, hoping that would give the kids the ability to finish that on time and without the stress of that final project. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to stop sharing for just a minute and see where we are.
Jill, I have 4 questions for you.
Sure.
Someone said, is there always a craft or STEM activity?
It just depended on the book for us. We tried to do something where they were able to create or color, because that was usually our early arrivers activity and kind of a break the ice. And a lot of kids found that it wasn't so intimidating with mom plus teachers there if they're coloring something or creating. But in terms of their project, yes, their project was almost always some kind of creation that they could bring in and talk about.
Okay. Someone said, how many book clubs did you do in a school year?
The most we did was 4, and that's because I always reserved September for my book fair. We usually did an October one and a November, and then we would come back and start I usually did my next book fair late February, early March, and then I would do another book club end of March and then in April. And that's trying to get 4 book clubs in was a lot when I was the only one really in charge of those.
Okay. Someone said, do you give away the same book that they read? Because we heard you say, okay, so I guess someone has a question about what books you give away.
So with Judy Moody, the book that we read was the first book in the series. And then what we did is we ordered the set of the entire series. Usually Scholastic has some kind of option where you can get those multiple book sets. And we let the kids choose which of those books they wanted. And it was interesting because some of them may have owned the newest Judy Moody because of a book fair, but they didn't know that Judy Moody, had one on going to college. And so they would have chosen that one. So not giving away the same book allowed for kids to kind of have a little bit of choice, especially if they already knew our character. We did the same thing for Dinosaurs Before Dark and Stink. Now, when it came to Where the Mountain Meets the Moon, we actually gave them the 2 companion books to that, the other books written by Grace Lynn. So they read the first book, but then they received basically book 2 and 3 to continue on.
Okay, and the last question from the chat was there, did you notice that families don't have time to complete the projects like at home?
We tried to make the projects pretty simple with the Me collage, and I could not find my photos. Again, that's one of those things of moving from one school to another. My Judy Moody collages were very simple. A lot of times they would just take pictures. One of them was like a club that they were in. And so for us, I told them, I said, everybody's in the club because you're in the Judy Moody book club. So a lot of them would take a picture or they would take the actual note we sent home and they would cut that out and paste it on there. So we tried to make the projects not too hard, and again, a little bit more artsy so that kids would be a little bit more inclined to do it. But for the most part, if the parents were going to be willing to bring them to 2 different meetings, we found and stay for both of those meetings because that was required. They had to have a parent there or a guardian. They were going to do the project.
Okay, and we have one question that just popped up. It said,
okay.
What took up the majority of your time at the first meeting since they had not started the book yet?
Okay, we usually spent the first part, we usually did maybe 5 to 10 minutes explaining our purpose. So we talked about character traits and we talked about what that meant. We also spent time, we read the first chapter together. So that's going to take you 5 to 10 minutes to read that first chapter. We also handed out a snack. Usually we tried to do that when we were already transitioning to something. So we usually did that when we encouraged the parents to read the second chapter with the students. We always gave time for the parents to read with the kids during our time. And then we usually, like I said, we usually gave the snack then, so that you're not doing multiple transitions. After they read the first and second chapter, us reading the first, them reading the second, we spent time going over the calendar, going over the project, explaining the discussion questions, kind of like I'm explaining them to you all. We don't expect you to write it down, but we do expect you to maybe talk about some of these questions as you see that they're necessary. But we tried to get kids at least 2 to 3 chapters through the book before they left, hopefully interested enough to go home and read more.
Okay, and that was all the
Okay.
questions from the chat.
Awesome. I'm going to go back to my presentation and real quick share about dinosaurs before dark, and then I'll do any more last minute questions. So this was a lot of fun because we did it with first graders. We did it in April and May. So kind of the end of April, beginning of May. You know, a lot of them are super excited about chapter books because they're going to be in second grade next year. And we gave all of the kids that night, one of the things we gave them, part of the money that we spent, was they all got a notebook and they all got a special pen, because Jack is always carrying his notebook and his pen with him so that he can write down facts about things. So of course we again sent home some discussion questions, kind of notice a little bit different format. We tried to make it very simple. Those chapters are also not very long, so there aren't as many questions that you are going to ask parents to talk about with their kids. And their project, I think, had the most creativity with it, is we asked them to create a Ciliosaurus dinosaur by using different parts of a dinosaur name. So that the big thing they had to do was name the dinosaur and tell us what they eat and then how to care for it. And then they were able to create their own dinosaur. And the kids, we found so much creativity with this one. We had kids that took Legos and they made their dinosaur. We had some that drew them on poster board. It was amazing, the creation and creativity that came out of that one. But again, it was just a way to show parents, like, what do you do when your kid is transitioning into a chapter book? And we also showed them the Magic Tree House website at our final meeting and allowed them to go in and create their own Magic Tree House in their rooms. And so that was fun too, to be able to pull that digital aspect into the meeting. Okay, I think, man, I feel like I've been talking forever. I think that's about it. What other questions do you have that I didn't maybe go over?
Well, Jill, there are none under the chat, so unless somebody
Okay.
wants to unmute, you're good on the chat.
Okay. Anybody last minute questions? Maybe, I don't even know. I tried to make sure that I didn't have anything anything that you would be left wondering at the end of this.
I know they did want the link, so if
Yes.
you want to put that in the chat, I know someone.
I'm going to do that right now, and make sure that I give everybody permission. I'm sometimes really bad and I forget to give everybody permission. And all the links again should go to, they should be live links. They should work. So if there's for some reason any issue with that, I'm sorry, it's such an ugly, really long.
And you have had a couple questions. They said, any tips? Or first of all, is this book giveaway a surprise or an incentive?
I don't. On some of them, I feel like after we did the first book club, pretty much everybody knew we were going to give away books for the second one. And we never really promoted it as part of the, I guess it is a good incentive if you were to do it that way. For me, it was always just, we're so proud that you finished this book and we want you to continue reading. So it wasn't really a surprise, but I don't know that we always promoted it a lot in our first meeting either. But again, like I said, word kind of got out. For me, when I first started doing this, we started with the second graders and then added, second and third graders, and then we added the fourth and fifth. Um, I I think I had kind of a lot of kids that came back year after year, book after book. So that works.
Someone said, any tips for making this virtual?
I would think you would be able to, as long as kids had the capability, I would think you'd be able to do a Google Meet, or you would be able to do, a Zoom meeting. It would be the same thing. You would allow them to share their screen and show their presentation. I think it would be more challenging. It's not as personal. Angie Wallace and I spent a lot of our time while they were reading and while they were creating, just walking around and talking with parents. And so I would definitely miss out on that aspect of it. But I think it's something you could very easily make virtual. The hard part would obviously be trying to get them the books or trying to get them supplies, because again, our school was not a very wealthy school, so we always try to make sure that supplies were not a hindrance to them finishing their project.
And the last, oh well, not the last. There's says, so you send a note home with every child in that particular grade level?
Yes, we sent home a note with every second grader and every third grader, and the first 20 we got back were the kids that made it into the club. And again, we did one year, we did Judy Moody, and then we did that Horrible Harry and the green slime. We did the green slime for those kids that were on the wait list for Judy Moody. So we let the wait list kids have first choice. We sent it home with them first. And then we gave them a couple of days, and then we sent it home to the rest of the second and third grade students. So it kind of gave them a little bit, like, we wanted to honor the fact that they turned their paper in for Judy Moody and didn't make the club. We've also had instances where parents have called us the day of or the day before saying, we just can't make it. We are going to be at a basketball game or a softball game. And we immediately went to the wait list and started calling people to see if they could come. And sometimes it worked to where they could come that night. And, a lot of times it was that they already had something planned.
And the last question says, if Linda's wondering if you can give something away other than books if your budget is low.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, when we did Horrible Harry and the green slime, you wouldn't have to necessarily make green slime that night. That was just an activity we did, but you could maybe send home supplies for that. But I really would encourage you to try and send home a book with them. And that's, again, I would call up your public library. Our public library has a grant that they have that we can fill out. And if we're giving books away to students, the Friends of the Library will sometimes help us pay for that. So if there's a way that you can give away books, I always feel like that is really important, because that's what you're trying to encourage, is a book giveaway and to keep reading. But I also know that not everybody's budget is the same. So if you have something that'll go along with it, or you don't have to give anything away at all once you finish the book club. It was just something that we came up with that worked for us.
Well, that's all the questions in the chat as of now.
What was that?
That's all the questions that are in the chat
Okay.
as of now, unless someone
right.
has another question.
Anything else? Ooh, I finished early. That means everybody gets to eat early. Some people over in the chat are putting some options for how to do some cheaper books. So that's good. And a lot of times too, we could always use Scholastic points when you are either your Scholastic Bucks, if you do Scholastic book fairs, those are always an option. But again, I always tried to look at what I had in my collection. I did Dinosaurs Before Dark for first grade, because the librarian before me had bought a class set of them. So I didn't have to spend money on that book club for the actual books we used. And I was able then to just spend money on the book that we gave away. So you just have to kind of play to whatever options you have. Oh, a book exchange. That would be a fun way to end. That's always a good idea. You'd have to set some parameters. Yes, the kids do turn in, like when we did Judy Moody, they do turn Judy Moody back in. So for me, I always encourage them to bring it to that second meeting. And then if they didn't, it's not a big deal because I checked the book out to them and it's on their library record. So it still stayed on their record until they brought it back. And I didn't ever really have any trouble getting those books back. But I think the important thing was putting them in the library collection. So the kids knew they were a library book and they were expected to bring them back in. We also told kids if they wanted to buy their own copy, they were more than welcome to use their own copy. They didn't have to. No student would be allowed to check out books for now due to the virus. In that case, I mean, it would be one of those things that you might talk to your public library. I know our public library has book kits, and you could encourage the people coming either to buy their own copy or to check it out from the public library. That might be an option too, because then you're not responsible for checking the book out, but they would still have access to it. Ooh, I like that. A digital badge for being in the club, like a Judy Moody badge. That would be good. Oh, something I forgot to mention, maybe. We did always the night after our second meeting when they had their presentation, if they had like a poster board or something like that, we did always try to hang them up that night before we left. So the kids loved coming in the next morning and seeing their poster up. We always put in high traffic areas. We tried to hang them high so kids wouldn't touch them. But we did tell kids if they didn't want us to hang their poster up, maybe if there was a special picture or something like that, then they could obviously take their presentation poster back with them. But we did try and put them up so that everybody could see them. And it tended to get a little bit more excitement when kids saw those. So the next time that book club letter went through, a lot of people were more willing to sign out. Epic would also be another good use of that, or if you have like a Mac and Via account and kids can check out digital books, that would be an option instead of having a physical copy. And everybody's saying that Epic is free during school hours, so that should help. Okay. Well, again, please email me if you have any questions, even if you think about it in a few months. Some ideas I've thought about for future book clubs are the I Survive series. I think a lot of people would enjoy that. And there's a lot of springboards for maybe you do a safety poster and how to prepare for a natural disaster. We also had made plans to do a biography book club where the kids in advance would tell you what famous person they were interested in. And so when they came to the first meeting, you would have a specific book for them. And we thought about using those, I call them the bobblehead biographies. I think you all know what I mean, the who was. And I thought that would be fun because then your final presentation, everybody can kind of choose a different person. And then you're learning about a lot of different famous people at that second meeting. So those are ideas that I have for the future. They just haven't happened yet. But you can definitely take, I hope, these ideas and springboard with them to something new. All right, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.